covering the Phillies for NBC Sports Philadelphia, Mr. Corey Seidman. How are you today, Corey?
I'm doing great, Ty. I'm curious what you mean by the fans approaching it differently. How so?
So far today, and this is something we've been getting, we do this thing called like the out and about test where we go by when we go out to the Wawa or whatever, when people who recognize us start talking about the team. The last several years, when we go out, the fans have been very, very basically just pure positivity. This one, there seems to be a lot more pressure and maybe a little less patience. So actually my first question to you was going to be, do you think the players are aware that the fans are maybe losing their patience with them winning the World Series, even though obviously they still have to go through 162 games? And do you think that that would affect how they play in any way at all?
I think they're all well aware of it. I mean, they've all addressed it as soon as they got to Clearwater. They addressed, the weight of the expectations, whether it was going to be a positive or how it was going to be approached. And Castellanos talked about that and how he thought that, based on what he had heard and seen when the offseason began, that it was almost like the Phillies were flying under the radar compared to teams like the Dodgers and the Mets who made all this offseason noise. I get the same sense as what you're saying, and I think it's because everybody realizes this is the last dance with this team. Because, when last season came to an end, many of us expected that was the last dance with that team. And then the Phillies brought back pretty much every one of the same faces offensively with the addition now of Max Kepler. So I can understand why fans might feel that there hasn't been enough change, but I would just still point out that this is one of the best 3 or 5 rosters in all of baseball. If you went to a fan base in any other city, presented them with the opportunity to have this 26-man roster over their team, I think pretty much every fan base outside of the Dodgers, maybe the New York teams, maybe a couple others would take this roster. So it just it's the perspective you have to keep that while it is a World Series or bust season, this is still a really good team capable of making noise. We've seen the last 2 Octobers, and really we've seen every October since baseball was invented that anything can happen. It's really just about who gets hot then. But yeah, the expectation is that this team's going to win 93, 95 games or so. If they don't, that would be a disappointment.
Hey Corey, I just have a question for you. How is it this impossible for Dave Dombrowski not to pick up a right-handed hitting outfielder for 3 years now?
Yeah, it is it's one of the major weak points of the organization in terms of depth is right-handed hitting outfielder, and that was evidenced this spring by the fact that the Phillies had to experiment with a couple of players who had never really played outfield before in Edwindo Sosa and Buddy Kennedy, just to try to give themselves a capable right-handed pinch-hitting option. Obviously, Cody Clemens makes the team today. Not that much of a surprise, even though he's a lefty, just because he's been here the last 2 years. He's demonstrated the value he has as a reserve player. But ideally, that final bench spot would have gone to a right-handed bat because, if you look at it from a practical day-to-day standpoint, the Phillies don't ever pinch hit for Turner, Castellanos, Bohm, or Real Muto. They're not pinch hitting a lefty for any of those guys. When they do pinch hit, they occasionally would pinch hit a righty for Stott or Marsh. That's why you would want, to have more right-handed options on the bench. But Clemens is, a capable extra man. And there could also be, we saw yesterday the Phillies claimed Carlos Hernandez, a hard-throwing right-handed reliever off waivers from the Royals. He'll be on the opening day roster. So if someone else doesn't make a team here in the next couple of days who fits their bench better, this might not be, the final product. A couple of years ago, the Phillies traded for Christian Pache about, I think it was 24 hours before opening day. So, you'd never rule anything out. But a big depth piece that will come back at some point is Weston Wilson. People have kind of forgotten about him because he got hurt the day before spring training games began, but he's a right-handed hitter, versatility, infield, outfield. He might be in play, by early May once he's back from his oblique strain.
Corey, I want to ask you about a guy you just mentioned, and that's Stott. And the reason I say that is 2 years ago, looked like, wow, this guy, we already know about his glove, but he's a 280 hitter. Then last year, he claimed there was some injuries and maybe he took a step back at the plate. It's now year 4. Do you, in your opinion, who is Bryson Stott? Is he a guy that could possibly one day be batting at the top of the order, or is he a guy who's always going to struggle to really bat, a high enough percentage to be that type of guy?
Well, he needs to hit 280. His ticket to making a lot of money in the major leagues is by hitting 280 with a 330 plus on base percentage and stealing bases and playing his elite second base defense. That's the skill set he needs to focus on, the skill set he is focusing on. It's not about power. It's not about, it's not really about extra base hits. You love him. You want him to hit doubles, but really for him it's just about making solid contact, thinking up the middle, not getting beat on fastballs. I do believe that he was hurt last year. I don't think that was just like an after the fact excuse. We saw it where he would take swings and he would flex his elbow, and if you just watched how incapable he was at times of, catching up to pitches, you could tell something was wrong. But he's a major piece of this puzzle, because if he can be the second leadoff hitter, batting seventh for you, or eighth, that's pretty big, because then you have like a decent on base and speed guy at the bottom of the lineup before you turn the lineup over, where it might be Schwarber or Turner in the leadoff spot. So 2 years ago, that was a really good example, I think, of what the pretty good version of Bryson Stott looks like. I'm sure there are people in the organization that would tell you that he has even more of a ceiling, but if he can just do what he did in 2023, that's enough for this team. They need Marsh and Stott to be what they were in 2023, closer to that than what they were last season.
Corey, how alarmed are you about this whole situation with Ranger Suarez?
I mean, it's not the first time he's gone down with a back injury. Missed a month last year, derailed his season. Got to be a concern. I mean, you figure that the Phillies are going to get him back at some point early on in the season. Well, it doesn't seem like it's going to be like a major thing, but this has happened a few times. It's a contract year for him. He's going to want to show every team that he's healthy. He's going to want to show every team that he's as durable as possible. So obviously a really important year for him, but not a great sign that he begins the year on the IL. It does though harken back to why the Phillies didn't give away Taijuan Walker. Like, imagine if they traded him for nothing and just got $1 million back, right? Like a team pick up nothing but $1 million.
You'd have $1 million at least.
Yeah, but I mean, at least now you have a guy who can start a couple games for you. And if he gets blown up, and maybe it wasn't the right decision anyway, and maybe he gets let go, or because they do have other depth pieces starting pitching wise. But yeah, the Suarez injury, not great news. But they have Jesus Luzardo, an addition that looks even bigger now in retrospect, and they obviously have very high expectations for both lefties who are going to be healthy to start the rotation to start the year in Christopher Sanchez and Luzardo.
We're speaking with Corey Seidman, does a tremendous job covering the Phillies for NBC Sports Philadelphia. You brought up Marsh. I also want to ask you about Bohm. It seemed like, through the All-Star break, even after the All-Star break, that it was almost a budding star. Then he's literally benched in the postseason, and there was a ton of trade rumors. As we think about winning the World Series, what kind of player, assuming he's here all year, and I'll make that assumption, what does he need to be through October to help the Phillies do that?
Yeah, last year with Bohm was just so weird to me still to think back what happened there at the end. Because, if anybody would have told you middle of the season that was how his year was going to end, with him being benched in Game 2 of the NLDS and all this, negativity swirling around him and that he'd be an off-season trade candidate, if someone told you that the week before the All-Star break when he's hitting 330 with all these RBIs and he's on pace for 50 doubles and 110 ribbies, it would have sounded ridiculous. But I still just lean on, when I look at a guy like that, I lean on the skill set. We have seen year after year that Alec Bohm hits line drives, uses the whole field. He hits 280 plus. He hits with runners in scoring position. So until he gives you a couple years of that, or a year of that, there's no reason to expect that he's going to be that down player he was in September and October last year. I'm expecting Alec Bohm to come out, hit 292, 17 homers, 95 RBIs, 42 doubles, and be that important right-handed piece in between Harper and Schwarber. Great RBI spot for him again this year. I know we've said this ad nauseum this offseason, but Phillies talked when the year ended last year about how they wanted players who use the entire field, hit line drives. That's what Alec Bohm does. Alec Bohm does that about as well as anybody in Major League Baseball. So it's a valuable skill set for this team especially. And I personally just, speaking with Bohm the first couple weeks of spring training, he didn't come in and he wasn't pouting, he wasn't mopey. He was just like a normal guy. He reacted maturely the same way he did after that I Hate This Place game against the Mets. He understands the bigger picture. I think he's able to kind of, while he shows emotion on the field, he's able to understand all the business aspect of this game and how fickle it can be.
All right, which JT Real Muto shows up this year?
Yeah, that's a big question because, we call JT the people that have the moniker for him BCIB, best catcher in baseball, but probably hasn't been that, if we're being honest, over the last year or two. Still, the all-around skill set is great. Gives you, batting average power. When all's going well, batting average power, defense, speed. Last year, the speed was kind of taken away from his game because he had that knee injury earlier in the year, the meniscus injury that required surgery. But, I think that JT, if he can just be closer to what he was in 23, in 22, that's good enough. The Phillies don't need him to have a career year. They just need him to be that complementary six-hole hitter from the right side who does his job, who hits like 275 and drives in 80 runs. And just JT has had really high peaks and valleys over the last 2 years. He's been like far streakier than he was earlier in his career. And the Phillies have a lot of streaky guys, and three of them hit from the right side, and Turner, Castellanos, and Real Muto. So just a little more consistency is what they're seeking from him. And they've talked a lot about getting him off his feet more. That can't hurt.
No, that's a good point. Corey, I appreciate you squeezing us in on a busy day. Safe travels back up north, and we'll be getting started on Thursday. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ty. Appreciate it, man.
All right, that was Corey Seidman on the Comcast Business Hotline. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it. If you want more of this content, make sure you like and subscribe. And you can do that kind of over here if you want more of the best show ever.